Good evening and welcome to this session of My How. What you just saw was a really rough sketch of the main character of my most recent animated short film called Box Cutters. This short film is made with sand on this kind of animation stand, and it's based on a poem written by a wonderful South African author called Runelda Kamfer. I was very drawn to this poem when I read it, and to be honest, it was because of the title. It's called Box Cutters, yes. The poem is also called Box Cutters, and a box cutter is an essential tool in my studio, and it always has been. Since as a student studying set design, making model boxes, I've cut my fingers on it. And then in this poem, it's used as a weapon, and I was very intrigued by this interesting encounter of the everyday with danger. So how I would normally develop a new film is with one central image. When I read Box Cutters, I immediately had this image of a dog, this dog, and also a vicious barking dog. So it became a little bit of an obsession. I drew a lot of these dogs, printed them, sketched them in my studio. And how the process would then evolve is like, for a film, once I have the central image in place, I would then start to search other imagery to fill it out. This happens over a few months that I just live with a poem, and I would take reference images, normally walking on foot in Johannesburg, like taking photographs of scenes that I could imagine being in the film. So I would kind of build up this library of imagery. So yes, there's a suburb, and then it would be translated into sand, into these sketches. This bridge, for example, a pedestrian bridge that goes over the highway, I was driving to Midrand every day to teach workshops at a township like a few years ago, and I was driving underneath this bridge, but I never saw any pedestrians crossing the bridge. And then one day, for example, I saw this lonely figure, this young girl, crossing the bridge by herself, and I was wondering where she was going. So that's also an image that stuck in my mind that then went into my sketchbook for later on. Yes, and then this would be the image in the film. So yeah, this is, as you can see, I'm working with sand, and everyone always asks me, like, why do I work with sand? Because it's known to be such a difficult and slow medium to animate. And there is a bit of a story to that, to give you that response. And it actually starts with my background as a theater maker and as a performer and a scenographer. That is what I did first, but I never really enjoyed being in the center of the stage, as you can see. I always prefer to be in the shadow, behind something, to mask my presence, which then brought me to puppetry. And so for 3 years, I was manipulating puppets, and I mean, I think even on this photo, I couldn't find myself, but I'm here at the back somewhere, probably, holding a puppet. So I always enjoyed directing the audience's gaze towards something else, and I've always also really enjoyed drawing. So after spending 3 years in France manipulating puppets, all kinds of puppets, I came back to South Africa. And then I really wanted to explore still live performance by doing gestural drawing, so to combine my love for puppetry and for drawing in one. This is a self-made light table. It is the first light table that I've worked with this setup. So yes, so these are then this is my first performance piece called Sphere. And in this piece, I would then be creating shapes on the live table, that would be projected onto a screen, and then that a dancer would interact with. And this, I really loved it. Just the materiality of the sand. And then later on, when I started to become more comfortable with the medium, I thought like, okay, maybe what would happen if I create more detailed black and white drawings using the sand on the light table under a camera. And at that point, I was also looking through a lot of graphic novels by the Belgian artist Frans Massereel. And I always go back to his images because he makes these graphic novels that are wordless, but then he tells quite interesting and complex stories using very few images. So that has always been an inspiration to me. And that's also one of the reasons, one of the responses why sand, is because I've always loved like the black and white and the monochrome images. And also what he's doing there with the wood block is basically drawing with light and shadow. And I found that connected quite to what I was doing here. Oopsie. So to talk about the materiality of the sand, how could I? It's really nice to draw with because it is like liquid ink, but it doesn't leave traces. So you could make quite clear drawings with it. And I also really love the fact that okay, so I'm still working with an object, and that it is a medium that you manipulate through touch. So in my films, it's very important for me for the presence of the animator to be still felt in the films, because using your fingertips to create and to manipulate these images. So when I started to create like more refined images, I started to experiment with a different set of tools that I found by accident in an art store, such as this thing that I would never really use. I think it's for blending acrylic paint. I still don't really know, or for blending pastels. But what I love about it is that it can create really clean edges. So this is a tool, and also if I do like large architectural drawings and I have to create a straight line, then this is my go-to tool. This, as you can see, is the porcupine quill, which is something that I found by chance while walking in the bush. And what I liked about it is that it does have this very sharp point, but that it's not like an etching needle that will scratch the glass. And it's, I have a collection, shorter ones, longer ones, finer ones, but, oops, let me just, is it coming back? Yeah, there we go. So that you could create very, very fine, for example, like really, really fine things. I never animate while wearing a scarf because that has happened where I was animating and then shock horror, 2 days of work, and then you have to restart the scene. Animating in winter, not always such a good idea. So yeah, this is also just a tool with a sharp point, and then of course a sieve that could, because when you create, like almost like when you're working with aquatint and you want to create a gray area, I would then layer these very fine particles and then create shadows with that. So I work in a program called Dragon Frame. It's very like industry standard stop motion animation software. As you can see, like it records the frames. So, and then I take 2 images because the playback is at 24 frames per second, but I shoot at 12, so I do double takes. So I take 2 images before then manipulating the next image. You see, this is like the, so because you don't want to touch the sand. Then, like, not to, oopsie. See, it's anyway. And this is also a very favorite tool of mine. It's like an old paintbrush. I used it for the first time in box cutters. Sometimes I regret it because I spent so much time with it, but I mean discovering it. But then I found out that if you pull back a few hairs of this brush, you could get these like really fine textures, and that is great for like vibrating an image. It's like, especially on the edges, because when you don't want the edges to be too straight. We are going to make a very strange animation now, but that's what happens. Because normally, I mean, my shooting rate, like my quota per day, as they would say, is 2.2 seconds, which I'm quite proud of because it's quite fast. But I mean, I met another producer the other, and they were working also on a standard animation film, and they were more than one animator, and their quota was 1 second a day. And so 2.2. But some scenes do go quicker, so you know you work along an average. Because also what happens sometimes, like what I'm doing here is making mistakes, then what I would then do is wipe everything out and start again, and that's what we would call a retake. So, tick. So it is, I mean, it is slow and it is calm and kind of lose track of time while you're doing it. So I could do this for hours. I have been doing it for hours over many months when making my film. So, and then the trick, sometimes there are shortcuts, so I could like copy these frames, paste reverse, and then and then I would do a retake on that. So now that I've spoken a little bit about the materiality of the sand, as you might have heard, box cutters was not only made with sand on a light table, but also with scratch on 35mm film. I have some frames to show you. So for a long time, I've been wanting to try out other techniques, mainly because I wanted to find a technique that would be faster than sand. So a friend of mine told me at a festival that she heard about a Canadian filmmaker who made 1 film per month, and he was drawing on film, and he was making it in a little shoebox in his car wherever he went, and that just sounded like a dream. I mean, you could then basically almost be working in a bookshop while making films. So I wrote to the Cinémathèque in Montreal, in Canada, where they have all these archives, and there are film labs where you can buy the film because it's quite difficult to get. And then they invited me to come and do a 5-week residency to just come and test the medium. I worked with a mentor, Stephen Woloshin, who is quite known for doing all different techniques, drawing on film. I was quite excited to try the technique where you bury the film in the ground and then have bugs eat it because this emulsion is so sensitive. But then when you arrive in Quebec in the middle of winter, the ground is frozen. So that did not go according to plan. Unfortunately, I so fell in love with the amount of detail that you could fit onto a 35mm frame, that the technique did not make me work faster, but actually slower. Those are images of film that I was scratching, but I really enjoyed the process because I've also been making dry point prints and then was using my etching needles and just experimenting like with all kinds of drills and Dremels. But for box cutters, I then wanted to create something very delicate. So this would be 24 frames. This is a length of 1 second. And I mean, what I also love about scratching on film is like I could really measure out my work for the day. So I would be like, okay, well, this is what I need to animate today before going home and walking my dog. Let me show you how I scratch like one frame. I'm just going to go back on Dragon. Cut. Took. So this would be like the images in movement. So you could almost see the animation with your eyes, and then technically you could also make this kind of animation without using a camera and then just judging one frame to the next with your eye. Okay, now I will scratch on the film. I really enjoy working with sandpaper. Just see if I've got the right. And then, like, if I wanted that to move across. Just getting my etching needle. Also work from top to bottom. And that would be the fast way to do it, because then that would be a moving line across. So I've done that where I take a Dremel and then just create patterns as well. And see, the harder I scratch, the whiter the line becomes, and the lighter I scratch, it's like a very dark green, because the emulsion has many layers. And then after that, I would then take photographs of it with a macro lens under the camera. So one by one, and then just slide it through. Just get it here. So this would be an animated sequence of 2 seconds made with scratch on film. I think it took me about 4 days. And now, although I really liked the green and the look of the emulsion, I knew that for box cutters, I wanted to do something in black and white, so I needed to treat these images like in compositing and just make it black and white and invert it. So this is what it would look like then combined with the sand animation. Okay, so now that we've looked at some of the techniques, I'm just going to hang this 3 seconds over there. And I will explain to you more a little bit about the making of box cutters. I mean, it started off as a series of tests that I started to animate during lockdown in COVID, because that's one thing that I could do, was to be in my studio and to make work. It was actually quite nice. So now I have to say, while I was shooting these tests, I didn't really have any end goal in mind. I didn't know why I was doing it, but sometimes we just have to make what we want to make. It did lead to the film being financed. I, by luck, met a French producer who saw the tests, Olivier Catrin, who is now my producer in France, and he really liked the material, and he said, well, let's see, because I'm sure Arte, a French television channel, will like it and will come on board, and they did. So, yes. Now, back to the physical animation process of filmmaking. I mean, when you are attempting to make a film with really detailed images, which is what I wanted to do with box cutters. I really wanted to see how far I could push the detail that I can get with the sand. One needs to do a series of line tests before animating the image on the animation stand. So, for example, these would be examples of rough line tests that I would do to figure out the basic movement of a dog in the film. And then this is the film animated in sand. So in the end, you are actually making the film twice, because it's prepping and then animating. Not for all the scenes, but for some of the more complex movement scenes. In terms of character design, there were a few interesting things and questions that I was faced with while making the film, and that is, for example, in the film there is a woman in a car, and she's quite a central character. Here she is in the film.
Die kar het stadiger gery, tot ek naby genoeg was.
So that was the final result, but before getting there, I was playing with different characters, first in sketches and then working under the light table. For example, this character, I was just not sure how to represent this person, because the main character, the protagonist in Box Cutters, runs up to a car crying for help, and the person doesn't help her. So I thought it was going to be maybe a wealthier person of different generation that would just be unempathetic, but then that didn't work. So then I was like wiping that off the table and then doing retakes. So when I realized that I essentially needed to put myself in the position of that character in the film, I then decided to go with a much younger woman, and this is one of my co-workers, Jeanne, who is generously taking the position of a driver holding a vacuum cleaner, because it was very difficult for me to get the details of the hands and the fingers and the knuckles. It's not an easy thing to draw, and it needed to be just right. And then from this image, I think she was just surprised at what I asked her to make me do. I really liked her expression, and then decided to go with that, because we don't know if she's shocked, terrified, frozen. It's kind of ambiguous. So then that is the expression that I worked with. So not animating much, because also as soon as you start to animate the face, it gets messy and it takes attention from the eyes. So it's just the eyes moving from left to right. So from the beginning, I knew bread was going to be important. So this is like a that's a reference shot I shot of bread, because in South Africa we have these bread slicing machines in ShopRite and in Pick n Pay, and I just like the noise that they make. It's so gritty and harsh, so I knew that I wanted that to be in the film. And what I will show you now is honestly the shot that I'm the most satisfied with in the entire movie. It's the most rewarding shot. When I watch the film and the shot comes up, it really gives me a lot of joy. Thank you. Yes, we can watch it again. Okay. I won't mind. Yes. So I will quickly explain to you. Yeah, there we go. Why and how that happened. So let me just take that down a little bit. So what you would basically have is the bread. Magic tool. And then to create the illusion of a plastic bag over it, I would basically be putting these lines between the slices for a few hours. Well, more than a few hours. Maybe a day or so. I know. Just do it right. Yeah, and so very slightly, so you can still see the slices, but not lose the line. So, and then I would redo every slice. So it's basically just retouching these lines to create the sense of the plastic bag moving over the bread. Just this last one, and then you could get the duck. Yeah, so, and then I would do that continuously, and this shot is 3 seconds, I think it's about 70 frames, so at 12, so it's like about 36 times going every time. Being very careful not to get a scarf in the way and not to mess or drop a tool, not to mess anything up. Yes, so still speaking about references, in Box Cutters, there is a scene of violence, but I knew from the beginning that I wasn't interested in showing the actual attack. I really like this idea, Abbas Kiarostami, an Iranian filmmaker, who says that half of the film happens on screen and the other half happens in the audience's mind. So for me, it's like always very important to just give suggestions and to be very subtle in what I show. So when I was thinking, okay, how will I show the attack or the violence, I then thought, okay, but what if I would show the remnants of an attack? And headphones, the main character is wearing a pair of headphones in the beginning of the film, and then I thought, well, what if I would just create a beautiful still life with a long camera pan? That would save me a whole lot of days of animation. And maybe that would then convey what I wanted, so that it really is. So it's just a fragment of this the event that I'm actually showing on screen, and then leaving a lot of space for the viewer to imagine what actually happened. So these are my headphones that I put in a garden in Lille, where I was making the film in springtime when there are flowers. And then this is the film. This is the scene from the film.
Een het my van agter gegryp. Die ander het die bokskatte teen my keel gedruk. Die ander een het my bene onder my uitgeslaan.
So now we come to the last scene, which is the scene of the grandmother. There was a lot of discussion about the last scene of the film with the producers, with Arte. I think we all had a different idea of what the grandmother must do when she says the last phrase of the poem. I couldn't really imagine it by drawing it. In a sketchbook, I couldn't really find it, drawing it on my light table. So I started to reenact the grandmother and trying different things. I would say it and then maybe peel some potatoes. I could say it like, and then pack away plates. And then one day I put up my phone and I was, well, what would happen if I, embodying this character, just take off my glasses and clean it? And that is basically what gave me the answer of what this character would do, is by actually performing her. And so this is in the co-working space where I was working. That would be the gesture. Because, yeah, just very... And then in the film, this is the time lapse of me animating and basically sculpting this figure with all my tools.
This is all one frame?
Yes, so that is, yes, so this is one frame that I'm touching up, but there's like small shifts in shadows. So it really is very, very fine adjustments that I'm making. So, so now she's taking off her glasses, and that's actually, so it goes down, 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 down. But yes. And then this is also the foreground, like the background is then shot separately and then put together in compositing. So what I would like to do now is to show you the film Box Cutters. I will take my time to just get it.
Ik kan niet precies onthouden wat die dag alles gebeur het nie.
So we're going to take a few minutes now for some questions, but I just wanted to, at this moment, just say thank you so much to Naomi and to Arno for taking us through that. Naomi, for allowing us into this very intimate and very private space that you occupy when you work, and to really open a window into that world for us, and to see the film after going through everything you did with such detail. It really allows us to see the work with new eyes. So I'm going to kick off the questions because I'd love to hear a little bit about the role of music in the animation, and particularly, I don't know how you come to scoring, because you scored and composed for this film and many others. What some of the considerations are that you take into account when composing?
Yes, Naomi and I had lots of discussions about the music. So we had a pretty clear idea of where we wanted to go with the music. We wanted to make something quite edgy, very modern, stay away from the tropes that you often find in animated films, a certain kind of music that's often used. As you've just seen, the main character is quite a hip girl, you know. She's young, and she's listening to music. And we also wanted to create music, you know, the attack that happens is very dramatic, but the music she listens to is in contrast with what's going to happen, you know. The music's very peaceful, it's very calm.
And we also spoke about guitar being your main instrument from the beginning, because Arno and I have been working for many years, so we do have this shared archive. When I say, okay, I want it to sound a little bit more Jim Jarmusch like he does in that, then he knows what I'm talking about. And the instrumentation, it needed to be real, because the sound, just to speak to the grittiness and the materiality of the sound. And then I also like the way that you layer simple things as well.
Yeah, so you know, I took a very minimalist approach to the music here, and you know, started with some very simple motifs, and then I made use of a lot of layering. One of the things I used in this film specifically is what you call the campanella technique, is when you take notes that belong to a scale, like say, I played D, E, F there. Instead of playing it like in that normal fashion, you place each note on a separate string, and then you get this effect, which gives it a much more dreamy effect. And because the notes are close together and form this cluster, so there's a dissonance that happens. And I think in music, the emotion lies in the dissonances. That's where you get emotion. And so just this very simple technique creates an atmosphere that's laden with emotion.
And what I love about us collaborating is that as a composer, you are always serving the image, that the music is there, but it's not too present.
That's right. So you know, like we spoke about actually the music contrasting what's happening on screen sometimes. You don't want to be too descriptive. You know, when you write music for film, I believe it's often simpler music that's more effective. You know, you don't want the music to draw too much attention to itself.
In this case, yeah.
And take away from the image. And you can often write music for film it's good music on its own, but it doesn't fit the scene, you know. And then as a composer, you've got to look at it and also listen to your director. And if they don't like it, or if it's not right, you have to say, okay, that's too bad. We'll throw it away and try something else.
Okay, great. So, questions from the floor. We've got 2 mics, so just put your hand up and we'll get a mic to you. At the back here, Marlene.
Thank you. It's a very unfair question,
Okay.
which possibly can't really be answered. How do you manage to make a film like this about a life experience that quite possibly you haven't encountered? This young woman is a person of color who gets attacked, but this is so normal. This happens all the time. Her grandmother just says, please go and buy some bread. Her grandmother doesn't seem to have the capacity to acknowledge that this is horrific. Because this is, in fact, everyday life. And I don't know if this is true, but I suspect your life is not like this. You are, like me, a white woman who has a different life, to Ronaldo Comfort. And yet you found this incredible empathy. How do you do it? It's a horrible question, but how do you do it?
Yeah, like in my theatre background, like working as an actor, the question is always to try and imagine and putting yourself in someone else's position. So it is a search within myself. I try to imagine how it would be, and yes, I mean, my role as a storyteller is to find empathy for the characters, for the main character who is being attacked, for the woman in the car, for not to come from a position of judgment, but to really immerse myself in that situation. Don't know if that's an answer enough. That's, I guess, my task as a director is to find the empathy in the story. So it's a craft, I guess. I'm not sure if it's specific enough, but yeah, it is really about using my imagination and then taking myself out of the center and then serving the story as if it was my experience.
We have a question over here, if we could just pass the mic.
Naomi, you've often worked with poems of Ronaldo Comfort.
Yes.
In fact, I don't really know if you've worked with other poetry. Maybe you have that I simply don't know, but clearly you find an affinity to it, and you even, I think you use her voiceover?
Yes, so that is, thank you. My very first film, An Ordinary Blue Monday, A Gewone Blauw Maandagochtend, that was also an adaptation of a text of Ronaldo. What I really love about Ronaldo's poetry is that she manages to describe a whole world with very few words. So the poems are short, condensed, but it's got this emotional weight, which is in a way the same thing that I want to achieve with my films. Like, it's not long films, it's short films, but I want to leave the viewer with something, with a feeling, with a... and that's also how I choose poems. Like, I have adapted also a poem of Jean Goosen, My Mama's Bossies, My Mom's Bonkers. And then it really is about a visceral, a gut response that I have when I read the poem. It's like, there is a certain feelings, like, okay, it's not about, okay, maybe I will make it, maybe I will adapt this poem into a film. It's like, no, I really need to make a film about this. It's like it comes from this. So that's why poetry, I really love poetry. I think it can encapsulate so many things through an economy of words, and it also gives me, as a filmmaker, a very clear structure to work with. So the architecture of the film already exists, and then I build like a second layer of visual imagery around that, like build a screenplay. around the text.
You've also
Okay.
done a poem by Jean Goosen.
Yeah, I see that.
Hello, Naomi. Hi, Ari. Thank you so much for this and congratulations on this. My question's a bit technical. It's a couple of questions, so I'll try and formulate them in one. Firstly, why do you use 12 frames per second? What's the reason for using 12 frames per second? Do you have a preferred aspect ratio that you work in, or do you switch between aspect ratios? And the last part of my question is, how do you combine music and your animation? Do you sometimes cut the music to fit the frame, or do you cut the frame to fit the music? I'm just curious, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, to respond to the first technical question, so film, like this, is played back at 24 frames per second. In television, it's 25. But it's played at 24 frames per second. But then to make an adjustment to 24 images in 1 second will take even longer. So then what I would do is, take one image twice. So I would adjust the image, take 2 images, so then it does play at 12. You can even shoot at 8 frames per second, but then the movement is more clunky because there's less things being done between every frame. The aspect ratio for box cutters is 4:3, mainly because this is 4:3, and I knew I needed to incorporate that with the sand, and then this like little frame that comes in, so that's why box cutters is in 4:3. I like the 4:3 format. Aesthetically, it works. I think my next film will also be in 4:3. And then music. It depends, like for this, the production process. I mean, Anna already had to send documents to the producers in France of like music agreements and things, and the film wasn't finished, so he had to write music without, like, you saw the animatic. So so here the music came afterwards. But then in other projects, the music was before. Trying to think.
It usually comes afterwards.
It really does usually come afterwards.
In some cases, I might say to Naomi, I think, we need another 4 frames here.
So it's really back and forth.
But in this case, I don't think there was any, you didn't adjust the images to the music in this case.
No, I didn't.
I did all the adjusting on my end.
Yes, because I mean the frustration is, I think for a musician, that if this film is still being modified, even taking away a frame here and there, then his timing shifts and then everything needs to be realigned. So normally we would wait for final cut and then Arno would put the music to the film.
Back there? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Firstly, congratulations for such
you.
an emotive piece of art. It was brilliant. And my question is more towards the tools used. The tools used,
yes.
Yeah? So with the tools used, do you reckon that you would use specific tools to ignite emotions, maybe from you as the author or the character, or were the tools simply an extension of you as the author, regardless of what the tool was? So in that regard, saying it doesn't matter what the tool is, it's simply an extension of me, or would the tools specifically, in hindsight or at present, happen to have been used to elevate a particular emotion or to express a particular emotion?
I'm just to be clear, when you're talking about tools, are you talking about
the tools
porcupine
used.
needles?
Yeah,
okay.
so any of the tools used.
Porcupine.
Yes.
Okay, so for me, like the tools was just, it was really just about mark making and finding detail. Like, I mean, as you could see, I think in the first sketch that I did, it's very difficult to get a character drawn in sand not to squint, which is why I started to then use the porcupine needle to really get the directions of the eyes right. So it was like, it really came just from the necessity of like which marks I needed for what. And I mean, this is a set of tools, but then say, for example, if I also build tools, like if I need to draw like say, the long bridge, I had like a long piece of cardboard that I would push things. It's quite sculptural, but it is really about mark making and finding precision in the images for this. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Kind of. Oh, we'll think more what I can say. But yeah.
Thank you for a wonderfully illuminating presentation. My question is really a codicil to the previous discussion. Where did Ronelda come in? Did she see the visuals? Did she read it all in one go and you edited it out because it was obviously the words were interspersed with lots of silences and lots of music? So what was her sort of involvement and how did that work practically?
Okay, so practically, so Ronelda knows my first film, and so I read Box Cutters, I asked her for permission, and then we negotiated the rights through a publishing company. She gave me free rein, because she said, well, do as you please, because she's living in Makanda, and I was living in France. Her voice, yes, I haven't spoken about her voice, so I did audition, like, actors, or asked a few different actresses to read the poem. But it felt too enacted and dramatized. It didn't really. So, and then at some point, I just knew that it was Ronelda who had to read it. And the only direction we gave her was to read the poem the way she wrote it. Then Arno, you can say, like, you recorded her.
Yeah, so I went down to Grahamstown, where she lives, to record her. And like Naomi said, we didn't really give her any direction. She read the poem exactly the way the tone she wrote it in.
And then we interspersed.
The only thing I told her to do is to just split up the lines, because when you read a poem, it's all in one breath, and in the film, there's a line and then there's silence.
But when she read the poem, she didn't have any visuals in front of her.
Yeah, she didn't see any visuals at all.
She only saw the film when it was finished, and I'm actually, I'm yet to meet her in person. We've only been communicating in email, but so that was
We have a question there, and I think that needs to be our last question for the evening.
Hi, Naomi.
Hi.
Arno. It's Megan. Thank you for showing your amazing work here. It's lovely to see it in Johannesburg. I was very intrigued by the kind of the sound aspect, but when you were speaking about the braid and how the braid cutter had the sound, and you were drawn into that sound, and you just knew you had to sort of bring that in. So the kind of poetics of what makes it into your work, the materials, the materialities, how they call you, and how they leak out of the film. I don't know which way the leaking goes, leak into the film, but kind of your fascination with material objects and I guess how they call you and how the sort of poetics of that. So this poetry that you love, that you speak about, and the way that kind of charges the film. I was just wondering if you had any other, or if you wanted to speak about that a little, or if you had any other moments in the film that were a little bit like that, this walking, well, there was the bridge and the walking in shops and just being called, intrigued by the sound of the braid cutter, and that then needing to feature.
So because I guess like what I really love about making really short films is that like every image needs to be picked and has its place for a reason. So I do, you're right, I do pick those elements quite carefully. To me, the birds, like with the braid, that was also something that I started to imagine quite early on in the process, because it's just of the thing that everyday life continues, and it's also a scene that's familiar in most big cities, birds on a sidewalk. Other stories, there was like little details like the fan in the grandmother's lounge that just swiveled from side to side, like nothing ever changes. So everyday objects, you're right, it is, it's because also objects are also somewhat easier to animate than walking people, but to try and find these still lives. So what would be another one? The bridge, the shadow, the boxing on the television also. That's also something that I just collected. So it's, I mean, that's kind of the method I use. I do have these things, and then there's like reflection that goes into it, but it kind of finds its place as it should. And then a lot of that also enters the film during the making.
There's actually an interesting story about the bread cutting machine. I had to record it, and it's actually not so easy to record it because you're usually in a, you're in Checkers or in Pick and Pay or wherever, and there's always music playing. So.
And you cannot have music.
And you can't have other people's music in the film, of course. And luckily, one day there was load shedding. So I could go. I went into, I think it was a Pick and Pay, and the machine was working, thankfully. But there was no other sound, so I could record this machine, and I found this beautiful machine that made this really nasty noise, because some of them cut really quietly, and this one was
we wanted to not.
It made a really great sound, and I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Thank you.
Naomi, firstly, an enormous thank you for showing this. I've seen your films, but to see the care and the laboriousness with which they make, if you're making 2 seconds a day, and that's 1 minute a month.
Yes, that's 1 minute a month.
And this is an 8-minute film?
This is an 8-minute film.
So this is a year's work?
This is a year's work, yes.
So, and you can see that, and that's kind of, and as you said, it's not the slowest animation. For some people, this is working very fast.
For some people, it is. I started to film a little bit after another friend of mine started hers using the pin screen, and she worked 2 years on 9 minutes. So I beat her.
but it's always been an extraordinary thing, the way, and exemplified in animation and your animation so much, is the transformation of time in the studio. The way in which it expands enormously from 8 minutes into a year.
Yes.
And then contracts itself back down into 8 minutes when it comes out the other way. And I think that space of the studio is a space of the transformation of both poetry into images, but also the physicality of time is so beautifully clear in your film. So thank you so much for showing this to all of us. I don't think people here realize what a star Naomi is in the international animation world. So it's great that you did it. Thank you.
Thank you.